Hello there, Minnesota Twins fans. Welcome back to a new episode of Twins Spotlight. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had a show, but hopefully everyone had a good holiday season and are ready to start thinking baseball here. Who knows when that'll get started, but hopefully it won't be too long. We're going to continue with a new spotlight tonight, and we're going to get to know another exciting right-handed pitcher in the Twins organization. He was the 10th round pick of the Twins just 2 years. Well, I'd see a year and a half ago in 2019 out of Duke. Pitched for Elizabethton that season, and of course, we'll talk about his 2020 season as well. But generally, we'll just be getting to know him. So let's bring in our guest of the evening and introduce you to Ben Gross. Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on, Seth.
Absolutely. Well, let's start at the beginning. You grew up. What was your first kind of memory of being in baseball or sports in general?
I think my parents did a good job of introducing me to a lot of different sports when I was younger. So, I played soccer, faint memories of maybe some basketball here and there, and obviously baseball. And I think, as is true of a lot of, my peers, I was just better at baseball than the other sports. So I kind of stuck with it. And, obviously had some ups and downs throughout my career, but, ended up getting drafted, and now I can pursue this lifelong dream of being, an MLB player.
Yeah, obviously that is the goal. So let's talk a little bit about that. The draft. You were drafted in the 10th round as a senior, but the year earlier you had been drafted as well. Was that a difficult decision for you to first of all, maybe we should go a little further back. You actually pitched for 3 seasons at Princeton, graduated from there, got drafted, but then became a graduate student at Duke. So, I know that's not really even a question, a long-winded question on my part, but kind of talk through that process. And was it difficult not to sign after your junior season?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start answering by kind of giving everybody a rundown of, what my college career looked like. So I had some shoulder issues early on, needed shoulder surgery my senior year of high school, another shoulder surgery my freshman year in college. So I missed that entire season, which is why I was able to transfer to Duke after I graduated. Only threw 3 innings sophomore year, wasn't any good. Yeah, sort of, put my head down and worked really hard, pitched pretty well my junior year, pitched pretty well senior year. But I wasn't really happy with how my college career had gone. Obviously it was good enough to warrant a draft pick by the Houston Astros, but, I sort of bet on myself by, accepting enrollment at Duke, and had a pretty good season there and ended up getting drafted by the Twins. But I don't think it was that tough of a decision because my parents taught me the value in education, and, it's not going to hurt having a master's degree from another great university.
Absolutely. Now, let's kind of go back to those high school days. You had talked about how you weren't necessarily a big prospect and you fought the injury situation. What was the decision for you to go to Princeton? Was that something you had kind of I know that's the high school you went to too. Was it an easy decision? Was that always part of your plan?
It's funny. My parents gave me a stuffed animal when I was a baby of a tiger. Maybe they wanted me to go there from the start, but
subtle.
Yeah, but you're right. I did go to Princeton High School, so I grew up walking around Princeton University's campus. Obviously, it's a great school. I figured going to an Ivy League school, maybe mid-major, wasn't going to have to compete with some of the top prospects. I figured I had a good chance to play if I stayed healthy. Didn't quite work out that way, but when I did get healthy, I was immediately given an opportunity to start. And that was the main goal, to get exposure.
Was that, you mentioned the injuries, but what was your transition from high school to college? You mentioned you were hurt the freshman year and didn't pitch a lot your sophomore year. So what was it that you, figured out? Was it just maturity and growth your junior year, or was it simply health?
I think health. I wasn't a huge prospect in high school, but I think I was a pretty good pitcher. So it was just a matter of, feeling right and, putting it together on the field. I think a lot of my maturity and development came in the classroom at Princeton. It was not easy being a student athlete at an Ivy League school.
Oh, I can't even imagine. So, I mean, I have to ask, what was your major, and how difficult was it? I mean, I've talked to people that have gone to other Division I schools, and they talk about how hard it is there to finish in 4 years, much less, less than that. So, what was your major, and how did you balance that time?
So, I actually started as an engineer, chemical and biological engineering. Turns out I'm not very good at math, or not good enough at math to be an engineer. So I transitioned into the Bachelor of Arts school, and got my bachelor's degree in economics.
So as a one-time math major who got to differential equations and real analysis and realized
that's not there
anymore. I don't read in math. I fully get that, and I became an economics major as well, just because that was what I could finish in 4 years. So a lot going on here together. But what was, as far as the coaching? I mean, I imagine you're still at a Division I school, and I think a lot of people think Ivy League, it's all education, but I mean, it is competitive baseball at that level too.
Definitely. I was lucky enough to have Scott Bradley as my head coach when I was there, and he actually played in the major leagues for close to 10 years. So, he had his ways as a coach, and it's funny. It was the way he ran the program is very similar to how I'm coached, in the minor leagues, and how I imagine I'll be coached if I make it to the MLB. Very hands-off, kind of figure out what you need to do to get better and do it. But he was obviously very understanding of how rigorous the academic schedule was. And I think that sort of played into his ideology as a coach as well.
Certainly is. I'm forgetting to click buttons here. Again, I want to welcome everyone who's listening live, or whether you listen later. I'm chatting with this direction, Ben Gross, pitching prospect with the Minnesota Twins, drafted in 2019 out of Duke. We haven't gotten there. Now, you mentioned Scott Bradley. I had to look it up while you were talking. He played for the Yankees, White Sox, Mariners, and Reds over parts of 9 seasons in the big leagues. So that's a pretty good career as well. So let's talk again about that decision to go to Duke. And Pete Mackey obviously was a pitching coach at Duke. Was he involved, or had he already joined the Twins when you were making?
It's funny. He was actually the pitching coach when they were recruiting me to transfer over. So he was the pitching coach I met with when I went on my official visit. And, shortly after my visit, and I told Coach Pollard at Duke that I was planning to attend, he called me and told me that Pete had accepted a job with the Twins, which was a little upsetting. But, it worked out where, I get to, although I don't see him very often anymore, but it worked out where my first year in that first spring training, I got to see him a lot and work with him a lot.
Well, we'll definitely get to 2020, and that was a weird year for all the players, but also for Pete himself, as he got to be the bullpen coach with the club for the season as well. So I'm sure, as hopefully things return to normal, I'm guessing you'll see a lot of him over the next few years. And again, I want to remind anyone, if you're watching live on Twins Daily Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, feel free to send in your questions for Ben Gross, and we'll ask those. But if not, we'll continue with. I want to talk about playing. How was it more important for you to continue your education and your master's, or, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, was it about the decision to go play? I don't know, down south? Is that a way to say it? At Duke, in a bigger, more baseball prevalent conference, maybe?
I'm going to give you an answer you're probably not going to be too happy with. It was a little bit of both.
Okay.
Obviously the education aspect is really important, but as you said, playing in the ACC, warm-ish weather, it still gets cold there in the winter. Not as cold as Minnesota, though.
We'll compare temperatures later.
But playing in a bigger conference, getting a little bit more exposure, maybe making more of a name for myself as a potential prospect while still in college. All of that sort of played into my decision. And, at least for the time being, it seems like it's working out.
So far, so good. But I want to ask you about the scouting aspect of it. We'll get to the draft and probably the next question. But having been drafted twice, what was your interaction with scouts? Maybe even both times. You're drafted obviously higher in 2019 than 2018. But was your interaction any different? Were you talking to a lot of teams?
At Princeton, obviously playing in the Ivy League, you get a lot less exposure to Major League scouts than in the ACC. So while I was expecting to get drafted, I wasn't necessarily – I'd phrase that wrong. I wasn't necessarily expecting to get drafted. But when I went to Duke, having started on Friday nights in the ACC, pitched pretty well. It's sort of, and all of the interaction I had with scouts, not to sound pompous, but it was a bit of an expectation because, I guess that was the whole part of the reason I decided to go to Duke in the first place.
Absolutely. So when you were taken in the 10th round, let's start with, is that a round where you were expecting? Were you working with an advisor or anyone that was kind of giving you any idea or indication of where you might go? As a senior sign, it's impossible to know.
Yeah, I didn't really have any expectations of where I was going to go in terms of round. My goal was just to get drafted because that was my last year of college ball. So it was kind of get drafted or give up on baseball.
For sure. Tell me about draft day. Were you with family or friends at Duke? Where were you at for the draft? And
so we actually had practice earlier that day, day 2 of the draft. And Coach Pollard actually let us have our phones out at practice, those of us who were maybe expecting to get a call. And I had gotten some calls earlier in the day, kind of told me, stay on your toes. We might give you a call then or later, whatever happens. And after practice was over, it was radio silence, and I had sort of given up on the day. And I got a call from a Twins area scout saying that they were going to take me with their next pick. And I kind of thought that I was being pranked by somebody, honestly, because I didn't remember talking to any of the Twin scouts preseason. But, I kept watching that draft tracker and saw my name pop up, and I was like, wow, I guess I wasn't being pranked, but I was happy. I went out to dinner with a couple of my friends and enjoyed the rest of the night.
Absolutely. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me because if I've learned anything, it's if the Twins don't show a ton of interest, there's probably a decent chance you're going to get taken by them. I've seen that or heard that story over and over again. So let's talk a little bit about your introduction to pro ball. I assume, did you come to Target Field at all beforehand to sign, or did you sign in Fort Myers?
So actually we were at Super Regionals during the time period when everyone went to Target Field to sign. So I missed that, missed out on that experience. And then after Super Regionals were over, I had to, I think we flew back to Duke, flew back to Durham. I had to pack up my apartment, drive back up to Pennsylvania. And then I think I caught a flight the next day down to Fort Myers where I signed and kind of got cleared to start up with like the end of minicamp, I think.
So you went up to Elizabethton right away, I believe, with that group. Tell me a little bit about that Elizabethton experience. You kind of hear both sides of that. That nice introduction. It's a good way to meet a bunch of teammates, and it's also an area of the country that you're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, going through the ranks in college, you hear stories about either bad travel, tough food situations, tough living situations. And, I sort of brushed them off when I was in college, and Elizabethton sort of gave you that harsh reality of what minor league baseball was like. And so good introduction there, learning the ins and outs of struggling to make it as a minor leaguer. But, you said it, meeting a lot of teammates, developing a lot of friendships. I'd take harsh food and sleeping arrangements just to make those friendships any day of the week.
For sure. And I know the Twins took a bunch of college pitchers that year as well. And I think a lot of you guys did end up at Elizabethton. But I want to ask, you mentioned Scott Bradley was a college coach previously. You also got to play at Elizabethton for Ray Smith, Jeff Reed, a couple of guys with Ray Smith with 3 or 4 years with the Twins, been a part of that Elizabethton area since about the mid-'70s. Jeff Reed had, I think, 17 seasons in the big leagues. I mean, just it's got to be a good learning opportunity too, jumping right in with that type of leadership ahead of you.
Definitely. Those guys had incredibly valuable insight, in every facet of the game. And then our pitching coach, Richard Salazar, was equally as valuable to my development that year. Overall, it might get a bad rep from a lot of players, and, I may have complained a little bit while I was there, but, looking back at it, I'm happy I went through it, and, that I'm happy that was a part of my minor league career.
Sure. Again, that's Ben Gross. He was a 10th round pick in 2019. Spent that season at Elizabethton, where you pitched a lot. A lot of times college guys will, kind of get worked in a little bit slowly. But you jumped right in. I want to say you started one of the first couple of games, and you were on your every fifth, every sixth day, pretty much the rest of the season. Was that a good introduction for you as far as, jumping right in?
Yeah, I think it was good because I threw a full workload at Duke. I think I threw around 75 innings at Duke, and then I came to Elizabethton and threw another 50, I think. So getting that 125 inning threshold, the most I've ever thrown in a season, hopefully preparing me for a life in the big leagues where I'm throwing close to 200 every year. And in that way, I think it was a great introduction.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit spring training this year. I was there about a week before they kind of sent everybody home. In fact, it was before minor league minor league spring training had even officially started. I saw a lot of guys throwing bullpens and things like that. When did you get to Fort Myers, and what was that experience like for you before things went weird?
I think I got there at the end of January for a pre-spring training camp, which went really well. And then kind of as I was starting to throw to hitters, everything got kind of weird. But, everyone kind of warned me about that first spring training, how it was really hectic, and they were absolutely right. There's just people everywhere. It's hard to stay on top of like where you're supposed to be at certain times. It wasn't a full spring training, but I think I get the message.
For sure. So I'm just curious your perspective on, as things were starting to kind of go down, what was going on for you, and did you head back home immediately at that point, or did you stay in Fort Myers at all?
Yeah. So they told us that, they thought that it would be best if we went home with our families. And they scheduled flights home for everybody. So I hopped on the scheduled flight and went home because, I don't know. I guess that's just what they said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good to listen to those people at that point. But and what were you able to do throughout the summer? Were gyms and that type of thing closed down, or were you able to find a catcher and stay on some sort of a routine since nobody really knew how long you'd be out?
Yeah. So all the gyms were closed. A lot of the parks with baseball fields started shutting down. They were kind of closing gates, making sure no one could sneak in. Luckily I had some gym equipment at home. I had, enough baseball gear to kind of do the bare minimum for a while. And then I believe it was a couple days after they officially canceled the minor league season. Some of the Twins coaching staff, offered me a position in like a remote velocity camp. So then I started to get a little bit shady with my activities. I started hopping fences on fields that were shut down, parking illegally. it was, yeah, not proud of those actions, but anything to get my work in, right?
I was gonna say someone's gonna find that you've got like a record now or something.
Hopefully not.
So what was your communication with the organization? Did you have a pitching coach or a coordinator that you kind of kept in contact with fairly frequently?
Yeah, so it was weird at first. I think a lot of the coaches and coordinators were trying to figure out what was going on in their end before they started contacting players. And then, as I said, communication started picking up right when they canceled the minor league season. And, I had an assigned pitching coach or pitching coaches, and, I would report to them, 2-3 times a week, and then strength coaches and training staff, everything sort of returned to as normal as it could be from afar for a while.
So when did you find out then that you were invited to instructional league? Had you been there the previous year?
No, I wasn't. But I found out, I think they told everybody maybe a couple weeks beforehand. So a couple weeks beforehand, but I had been getting, tips that maybe I'd be invited, even maybe a couple weeks before then.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What was that experience like? I mean, you hadn't been there the year before, and you only had abbreviated spring training. A lot of people say it's similar to spring training. What was your instructional league experience?
It was interesting. Being surrounded by so many good players makes you think. It's kind of that imposter syndrome, right? Where I got invited and I see some of the other names of players that are down there, and for maybe the couple weeks before I got shipped down, I thought, man, I don't really belong here. But as soon as I got down there and started to get into the flow of things, and through some of my performances down there, I started to convince myself and hopefully some of the coaches and coordinators that I did belong down there.
Absolutely. And I mean, I remember reading a few, I don't know, it was Baseball America or what, but you were certainly mentioned as a guy that was standing out. So, tell us a little bit, what pitches do you throw? And what do you consider your, I guess, good pitches at this point?
So I just throw fastball, curveball now, starting to develop a slider. I like my fastball and curveball. I made a pretty significant velocity jump over the summer, which is why I think I was invited to Instructs. But I like my fastball and curveball. But if they want me to throw a slider, I'll throw a slider.
Sure. So I'm curious about at either at Princeton or at Duke, did you have access to the technology and the analytical baseline that the Twins have? Maybe not to that level, but how much of that was new for you when you joined the organization?
So not at Princeton so much, but when I went to Duke, I was sort of shocked at how analytically advanced the pitching program was there, and I guess that was an added benefit of playing a fourth year of college baseball at Duke, was to sort of ease that transition into the tech savvy professional baseball realm. It made it a little bit less scary. Sort of gave me a baseline of understanding for when I got introduced to it reintroduced to it during my first half pro season. I think you're muted. Sorry.
It's guaranteed that I do that 3 times, so that I've only done it once so far. This show is actually an improvement. There's still some show left, so I'm sure I'll top it. But is the challenge for you, as far as the technology goes, understanding what it's telling you, or is it about understanding how it works for you on the mound?
So the Twins coaching staff does a great job of making it understandable for players. But when I first got introduced to it at Duke, I kind of took a liking to it. Started doing a little bit of research of my own, trying to understand, what makes me good, what makes other pitchers good, what I could do to improve, and, sort of created an ongoing conversation with some of the Twins staff about, filling me in on what their thoughts are, filling them in with what my thoughts are. And I found that that's a really good way to establish a relationship with coaches and sort of, aid my development during my time in the minor leagues.
That's an interesting point. It was something that, in a previous regime or several years back, it was like a lot of cookie cutterness in the organization. And it definitely sounds like not only is communication a two-way street, but it's encouraged. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, no, that's a good thing. Individual development is a good thing. Last few minutes here with Benjamin Gross. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask. Wanted to ask you a little bit about this off season. You probably had a plan going into last off season. You had instructs. Did you get a plan for this off season, or are you trying to kind of incorporate any new stuff into this off season? And following up, I guess, have you started throwing, or when does that happen?
Yeah, I'm just kind of treating it like a normal off season. I think that I could get myself into a lot of trouble if I expected it to be a late start to spring training. So I'm kind of proceeding business as usual. I just started throwing bullpens maybe a week ago. But yeah, I think it's, just my normal off-season routine. I'm not trying to do anything special this year.
Okay. I assume at this point there's not even any plan for getting down there yet, right? Since Major League Baseball doesn't know when it's starting its spring training or season.
Yeah, definitely not.
Baseball's waiting too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So last question for you, and I'll let you get out of here. Outside of baseball, what are some of the things you enjoy? You are back, you said, in Pennsylvania, I assume with some family. And what kind of things do you do away from the game, which I think is important too?
So something I really enjoy doing is I'm pretty outdoorsy. I like hiking. So I'm trying to, obviously the schedule doesn't really work out for that because when I get home, it's freezing cold and snowing. But every off season, I try to, schedule a trip somewhere, go hiking, go sightseeing. And I think I might try to parlay that into a photography hobby, but we'll see. I'm looking at cameras right now. They're pretty darn expensive.
I was going to say I've looked at them as well. So I take a lot of pictures when I do go to spring training. So hopefully, I'm not a photographer either. So I just try and hopefully have pictures of everyone. And hopefully I'll have some pictures of you after this spring or maybe in Fort Myers or Cedar Rapids or wherever that takes you. So very nice to meet you. Thank you for doing this. And obviously best wishes for a good rest of the off season and a successful 2021 season, whatever that may mean.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having me.
All right. And again, thank you to everyone for listening. My name is Seth Stills of Twins Daily. Check out twinsdaily.com. This is available on Twins Daily social media on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, and it'll be available on Twins Daily's podcast shortly. So wherever you download podcasts, you can be sure to listen to this later as well. So again, thank you to Benjamin Gross, and let's not forget to go Twins.